unless you've got. Yeah, and also we're going to record it. So if you don't want to be on the recording, please do switch your videos off. But for all of our great panelists, you guys don't need to mute yourselves. But for everyone else, it would be great if you could stay on mute while we're speaking. I think that's it for the housekeeping. So just also a note about the Future Farm Resilience Project, which has made this webinar possible. So this project is something that's coordinated by the Land Workers Alliance, and we've got Bella from the team on the webinar today. And the aim is to really advise and support farmers who are transitioning away from the basic payment scheme and help them build resilience into their businesses. So a lot of the resources are focused around using more agroecological farming methods, and there's a series of webinars, different toolkits, mentoring and networking, which is all available. And you can find out more about the Future Farm Resilience Programme on the Land Workers Alliance website. This webinar today is our second one in a series of 3 webinars about direct selling. So this is actually also a collaboration between the Pasture-Fed Livestock Association and the Land Workers Alliance, because at the Pasture-Fed Livestock Association, we put together a toolkit on how to sell direct. So we're joined by 4 of the great members of the association who are going to contribute all of their amazing wisdom and knowledge around direct selling. So we've got Nick Green, Denise Walton, Andy Rumming and Silas Headley-Lawrence. And today we're going to focus specifically on slaughter, butchery, packaging and processing and sort of distribution to the end customer. So before we jump in and start talking about all these things, I'm actually going to play a short video that was made about direct sales, and then we'll hand it over to our panelists to do some introductions and then get started. So I'm just going to share my screen so I can play the video. 1 second. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see this. If you can't, please shout.
By turning our back on big food and commodities and engaging on a human scale means that we can start by asking ourselves the question, how do we want to farm?
I don't think farming is any different to any other industry. To be sustainable, you have to be profitable. You have to have a relationship with the consumer where there's a mutual respect for getting a fair price for a fair product.
If you don't control your price, your lever of profitability, of being economically viable as a farmer, is yield. Reduce your cost of production per tonne by growing more. And actually, I discovered that that kind of relationship between inputs and output plateaus off after a while. We were producing 600, 1,000 tonnes of wheat and oilseed rape and barley every year. You'd load it onto lorries, 29 tonnes at a time, and you'd trade it in widgets, and you forget that what you're producing is food. And I think that's part of my journey, is turning from kind of commodity producer to food producer. And instead of being competitive, being more collaborative. The best example for us is the restaurants changing their menus according to what the pig looked like and changing their processes according to how we needed to work. So they've developed recipes to use the lard, so lard fried rice. And they have their own butcher in the restaurant now so that they can handle a whole carcass from us because we produce a whole pig. It really is a two-way process. The other part of the story, which has been really liberating, is finding the people who are going to bake. It's quite moving to like stand in a field of wheat or emmer with the people who are going to be working with it all year. It puts that human touch to something and like completes the circle.
Where do we sell our beef? Well, historically, we've been a supplier to the abattoir. Secondly, we're moving into the wholesale market, which is more the supply chain, the processes in the supply chain characterized by butchers and food producers. Finally, a very important market for us is direct supply to the consumer. And at the moment, we're doing that with boxed beef. If we send a beef box off from here at 4 p.m. on a Monday, it can be in Perthshire in Scotland by 10:30 a.m. the next day. We've just commissioned a beef wagon where we're driving up to London, cooking burgers wherever people will let us cook burgers, and then driving back rather tired in the evening. That's an example of getting directly to the consumer. We are trying to say, look, good beef is good for you, and there is a way of measuring the goodness of beef. Join with us farmers as consumers in that journey of understanding how we bridge that gap. This ability to be able to communicate directly with the consumer, for us as farmers into the future, incredibly important, because at the end of the day, it's about the consumer.
So in terms of where our produce goes, the core crops will end up on your plates in a Chinese restaurant. And if you've eaten in a Chinese restaurant, you'll have eaten our produce probably. The crops that we have in excess of, that we don't plough back in, so apples and things like that, we've actually started using in our own spirits. The spirits that we make, we have our own website, and then we're just beginning to work with some bigger distributors as well. Constantly watching food trends, constantly watching what's on menus. You kind of get a gist of what's happening. We grow a niche crop, so a niche crop is not going to be a niche crop forever, because if it's successful, everyone else will try and do it as well. So we're conscious that we always have to be looking for what is the next crispy seaweed or the next baijiu or the next gin or et cetera, et cetera. We recently completed a little development kitchen and event space, which will also be home to our distillery. It actually helps with development and innovation as well, to have that exposure to all different marketplaces, to the consumers, restaurants, chefs, is really valuable. It opens your mind to the sort of different crops we can potentially produce, but perhaps more importantly, as time goes on, it's adding value. If we've got a niche crop, we can add the value, then it's a different customer base and nothing else.
On the product side, we are making butter, cream, yogurt, kefir, and we're just starting to make cheese. All the milk we produce goes into those products. We have 18 vending machines for the milk, which we change every other day. Then we use glass bottles, which can be recycled, so people can actually wash their own bottle and come back to refill it. We've got no waste of plastic or anything like that. Then we do farmers markets around different places in Dorset, Somerset, and we have actually gone to Devon to do some as well. We sell to cafes and we sell to some hotels. When people come up to us when we're at the farmers market selling, they come up and say, oh, how do you do this? How do you make this? Being able to tell people where it's come from and to be able to talk to them, you're having a relationship with the public that sells straight to them.
So this farm is 13 hectares or 34 acres, and it is in Dartington, just outside Totnes. It's a really good market for selling our produce. We sell all of our produce within a 20-mile radius. We have a public footpath, a very popular public footpath that runs right through the farm, and we've put signs up along the footpath just to tell people what we're doing and, again, how they can buy our food if they want to. We designed it in order to be low in carbon use, to sequester carbon, to be resilient to climate change, to support biodiversity, to produce lots of food, and to be home to a wellbeing service for young people and families in particular. From a business point of view, all those children that come to the farm, if you have 30 children, that's 30 families. And if you're running some sort of direct marketing business, then that's 30 more families that might sign up to buy your produce.
Local food systems tend to distribute the price paid for a food item more fairly along a shorter supply chain, providing a better farm gate price for the producer and better value for all. Local food businesses have different routes to market, spreading the economic risk in the event of one market failing, making farmers less reliant on uncertain export markets, such as seen with Brexit. Supplying local markets means producers are more resilient to the external shocks that impact long, complex global supply chains, such as changes in global weather and the cost of oil. Supplying local markets means producers can adapt quickly. In the first 2 weeks of lockdown, local veg box sales rose from 68,000 to 144,000. Supplying local markets protects producers from changes in supermarket sourcing policies and bolsters their autonomy.
Right then, maybe we'll get started. Hope everyone enjoyed that film. If it would be great actually if all the panelists could do a quick intro for themselves and a bit about what they're up to. Maybe we kick off with Silas.
Sure. So my name's obviously Silas. I currently manage FAI Farms, which is just outside of Oxford. We're not direct selling, but my previous employment was at something called English Farm, and I took that business on its kind of first 3-year journey into direct selling. When I took that on, it was very much a new project, organic, 100% pasture-fed, certified Longhorn cattle based just near Henley-on-Thames, also in Oxfordshire, and the cows had basically been there for a year or so. And when I started, I had the task of taking on this completely empty butchery unit and basically building a business, pretty much almost as a one-man band, doing both the farm and the butchery management. Started off using part-time butchers and grew that to the point that when I left, we had 2 full-time butchers. And within 3 years of going from that empty butchery, we were making the whole business, both the farm and butchery side, as making a profit. And yeah, I'd like to think that I've left it in a pretty good state for its next stage of its journey. And, you know, definitely enjoyed some pretty cool iconic moments on the way, being, you know, we're on BBC One with Mary Berry cooking our produce, celebrating the best of British local produce through lockdown, Michelin star chefs using our produce, lots of very high-end restaurants and people, you know, TV chefs, etc., in around London and our local area that, you know, were really singing and shouting about what we were doing. But the point was that what they were excited about was what the farm was doing and why that created such amazing produce, which was obviously what the whole point of the butchery was to give our farming system the shop front it deserved and to get every penny out of that carcass that it should have had, really.
That's great, thanks. If we jump to Andy. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Andy Rumming. Farm with my family on the Wiltshire-Gloucestershire border between Cirencester and Swindon. We've got 90 suckler cows, 600 free-range turkeys for Christmas, and about 50 sheep. We're selling all the turkeys, all the sheep, and some of the cattle direct. But yeah, hopefully we'll get more and more of the cattle sold direct. Yeah, so we've got our own on-farm butchery, which is really, really basic and which we converted ourselves out of an old milking parlour. We're pasture fly certified, and we basically sell, people come to the farm to pick up the meat. We have pop-up sort of collections, and we have a pop-up farmers market, and yeah, that's what we do.
Right, yeah, I mean, I haven't heard. Great. Denise, if you want to go next.
Thanks very much, Annie. Thanks for asking me onto this webinar. So we're based in the Scottish borders, Eastern Berwickshire, with 650 acres family farm. Chris and I started on 20 acres in 1990, and we're now on our 3rd generation and 650 acres. We farm 150 head of organic pasture for life cattle, and we add value by using veal from the suckle calves, but incidentally we also share that market with 2 other pasture for life organic farms in the west of Scotland, Rainton and Mosgiel. So that's sort of beef and veal. We have a small store lamb finishing unit, and we also take flocks of mutton flocks for our mutton products. And we have a small pig finishing unit and a small pig breeding unit. We also share the burden of the environmental burden of outdoor pigs with 2 other organic pig farms, and we take all the sows from one organic pig farm for our charcuterie. So we're adding value to all the species on the farm. We built our butchery in 2008, and it was basically doing probably 80,000 to 100,000, so 100,000 kilos of meat out of the butchery. It's quite small. We extended it last year, so we've more than doubled the size of the hanging room. And we needed to do that because working in a small space was actually not great morale for our butchers. We sell direct online, restaurants, hotels, farmers market. We have people coming to the farm. We have struggled a wee bit getting our very, very local market going, but we're trying to do that with sort of free deliveries. The business, both the farm and the butchery, supports about 11 full-time equivalents, 8 of which are involved in the butchery and the charcuterie facility and in admin, and 3 effectively on the farm. So yeah, we farm in partnership with our son Angus, I think, as I mentioned that, my husband Chris and myself. And our trajectory in terms of our farming method, really since we started farming as 30-year-olds in 1990, hard to believe, I have to say, has been agroecological all the way. And so now our farming is very much about no inputs other than muscle power and fuel. And interestingly, and this is also part of the story, which is part of the brand. Stories strengthen brands as long as they're authentic. If we were a similar conventional farm, we would be spending over £60,000 a year on a similar farm on agrochemical inputs and hard feed for our cattle. So we're no input, we're achieving very good live weight gains on grass only. And the more we manage the grass, the more species diverse our grassland becomes, the more grass we're growing and the better our cattle become. So in terms of cattle management, we've built a temple grand and handling system to manage stress. Stress is the key issue. Obviously, morally, it's a key issue, but also it is a key issue when it comes to meat quality. If your animals are stressed within 24 hours of slaughter, you've got a problem with your meat. So we've built this system. So we handle as much as we can, but Angus, our son, does most of the handling. So yeah, so low input, agroecological. We've been going for quite a while now. Our charcuterie is growing. We're one of the most comprehensive suppliers of organic charcuterie in the UK. And we do charcuterie to our beef, lamb, and our pork. So I could go on, but I think that's probably enough for the moment.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah,
Thanks. Thank you.
Comprehensive. And last but not least, hand it over to Nick Green.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Hi everyone, hi. Yeah, I'm Nick Green. I'm coming from a bit of a different angle. I'm not a farmer or anything, or any background in agriculture. I'm a sort of passionate food agricultural career changer. Had a career in London, and 3 years ago, left that, went to study agriculture at the Royal Ag in Cirencester with a sort of postgrad diploma, not quite knowing where it would lead, but just knowing I wanted to get involved. Sort of produce and provenance was my interest. Met Pasture for Life because they had the office on the campus there. Russ Carrington and Jonty Brunye and those guys completely sort of blew my mind, I guess, actually completely changed my outlook. And when I finished that course, I sort of teamed up with PFLA in terms of looking for sort of projects to get involved with. And actually Denise and Chris up at Peelan were one of my first sort of calls and conversations, and basically trying to build a bit of a network with farms. And we ended up, I ended up taking on sort of a having a go at building a supply chain for PFLA veal, actually, and dairy beef into London. I live in Twickenham in southwest London. Did that for a year, sort of, and then started doing a bit of outsourced butchery with John Chapman at Native Beef, PFLA, getting some stuff into London and chefs. And I was just renting a chiller van once a week, going to the abattoir, putting the carcass on my shoulder and going into sort of restaurants in London and getting some stuff going, which is encouraging. And then during the lockdown, and about 18 months ago here in Twickenham, we took on our own premises. We've got like a industrial cutting plant here with a sort of little shop front, and we've branched out and did what I always wanted to do, which is basically join the farms up with the urban market and get this into local people, families, and people who want it and value it. And that's really what we're and we do some online. We supply to some wholesale sort of online platforms that live around London, and we've got a couple in the pipeline coming through. And we're looking at retail. We're taking hopefully quite a sort of exciting retail site locally. We're in a very affluent area, so it's I sort of think we can't sell it in this area, but we'll sell it anyway. But still, but we're a rookie business. I'm only a year or two into this. We're working it out every week. We've got it's a cliche, but every week brings loads of new problems and challenges to solve. But all I would say is I know Denise is big on this, and she said is just getting in front of your customer and you have to have that face-to-face contact. You have to make those relationships. People have to trust you and like you, and stick to the authenticity of what you do, as we have, and everything. We've built a supply chain with the farms where we're sort of in a formal, sort of loyal, committed relationship with them. They're all organic, all passed for life, and it gives us a point of difference. But it's a bloody hard slog. So. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think it's great to have your input as well in the conversation today. So I think we're going to kick off first with kind of start at the beginning and actually how you might select the right animal to send to slaughter. So what you would look for. I know we've got a bit of different experience here, and also again thinking about the customer. So if you're selling direct to customers from the farm, but also what restaurants or butchers might want to look for in a carcass. So I don't know if you want to kick off, Silas, maybe when you were at English Farm, how did you select what you were going to send in terms of age, conformation, fat class?
Sure. So obviously the challenge with direct selling at farm level is you need to be, well, in terms of what we were trying to do anyway, we would wanting to finish cattle 12 months of the year. So we didn't kind of shut up shop in January and February and start again in spring. We had to have animals of a good quality, of a good grading all year round. So the way that I kind of dealt with that was, you've always got cull cows and you've got, I don't know, heifers that didn't get in calf, or those kinds of animals that they're there, that, in a normal farming situation, you probably get them on a truck and get them gone. They're your kind of safety net to help ride that kind of skinny gap in January, February, March, early April, when some of your more kind of prime stock or your growing animals, might not put as much weight on. With us, it was outwintered. Everything was outwintered. So it was stockpiled forage and meadow hay. We weren't, albeit being grass fed, we didn't have the luxury of having them indoors or feeding high protein, high sugar silage or whole crop or anything like that. So those cull females or empty barren heifers that we could get extremely fat we would put through the butchery in those end of winter. And actually what we found was there was a niche market mainly consisting of quite high-end chefs. So when you start approaching chefs and restaurants and pubs, you do gauge that obviously there's chefs and they're all into different things. So a lot of the high-end chefs we work with are really, really keen for that cull cow beef. So similar to the whole dairy cow beef, that kind of idea. But what you really need to do with those, they have to be really fat. So don't get too hung up on gradings. Our prime stock, we pretty much would finish at your good old R4L standard market, bang in the middle green square. The longhorns, they'd be kind of an average of 185, 190 kilos a side. But those big cull cows and empty heifers, we would be taking in at a 5 5H fat grading, which would be over fat, and you would actually get penalized for if you were just selling into the standard marketplace. And the reason behind that was, especially with the cull cows, is with the cull cow, you want to dry age it longer. You know, if you think with muscles, the longer the animal's alive, the more it's using its muscles. The more it uses its muscles over time, the more kind of tense those muscle fibers become. So with the very fat carcasses, we could dry age it longer without losing too much moisture out of the meat. So if you start putting thin cull cows into your butchery, no matter what you do, you'll probably get tough, pretty unsaleable meat unless you're just mincing it or doing slow cooking cuts or making into the burgers. And we did get the odd one of those that no matter what we did, I couldn't get it fat, so it went in. But we made sure we had a really thriving burger market, and most of it went into that. So we still made a lot of money off it, but maybe 40% less than we would have done if we'd sold everything as we would have done with our standard cutting list. But what we found is, I kind of alluded off the point, but with the more high-end chefs, they were almost prepared to pay a premium for this really fat cull cow beef that we could get in the chiller and age it for 60 plus days. So, you know, a very traditional perception is that this old cow beef is poor quality, it's very tough, you know, don't touch it with a barge pole. Actually, if you find the right market and you treat it properly, both before slaughter in terms of getting it, you know, overly fat almost, and also dry aging it for a long period, you can turn that into a prime market. Again, that was very popular around Christmas. Again, with the skinnier cows that, you know, 16, 17-year-old cow, and you just couldn't get a fat sometimes. Again, it went into a burger market. So I'll maybe touch on this later, but, you know, I made sure that we had a very good network of restaurants and other producers around us that really wanted to sing and shout about what we did. And there was a very successful pub near us. They actually set up the first Michelin-star pub in London, and they since set up 3 more restaurants around Henley. But they've built a whole burger barn at one of their pubs, and the whole barn and the branding is centralized around English Farm, and they're only using English Farm burgers. So any of those things we can't sell, any of those animals that don't quite meet our standards, we had a market for that, where they're taking, you know, up to 2,000 burgers a week. So you have a market for every single animal on your farm. And just because it doesn't meet your perfect standards doesn't mean, you know, that you can't get rid of it, or we should just kind of put it into the standard food chain. But in terms of picking the right animal at the right time, you know, just visual indicators, and looking at an animal, you know, think about age, how much energy is that animal consuming? You know, if you've got a fat cull cow that can go compared to a prime stock animal, the prime stock animal might be better off leaving it a bit longer, might get a little bit more fat coverage, might get a little bit more marbling. Just bear in mind that once you get to 30 months plus, the cost of slaughter increases. So to take the spinal cord out for over 30-month animal was about £95 now, 90 or 85. Used to be about 35 a couple of years ago. So yeah, physical indicators, I look at the brisket and the back of the tail. If the brisket's kind of dangly bit underneath the neck, below the front of the belly, that's kind of full and bulging. And there's kind of fat rolls above the top of the tail, then you've got a pretty good idea that animal's of a good grading, ready to go. But yeah, just plan about when you're going to need carcasses, think about when your peaks and troughs are, and hold animals back depending on their class, age, and fat covering accordingly to when you're going to need them.
That's great, thank you. That's really comprehensive. Just also a reminder that if anyone wants to ask questions, we can take them as we go, so please do put them in the chat. So I think we'll hand it over to Denise next. It would be great to hear a bit from you about how you select animals ready to go, and I think you've got sheep as well, and yeah, how you choose what you want to send and when.
Well, the great thing about selling direct, so you're not confined by the Europe criteria, but obviously it is, at the end of the day, we all need to make a living on the land that we're farming, and it is making sure that the animals are fattening within a time that actually doesn't lose you money. It's very easy to do that with lamb, because lamb can be very responsive to changes in grass, and we're only grass feeding. So we have mutton ewes they hold their fat much better. So store lambs to fat are slightly more difficult. So it's just a question of stockmanship, really. We run them through the race on a weekly basis. We select the fat visually, and if we need to, we weigh them. We've got a set of scales. They hold their fat well. We do make sure that when we get ewes from other PFLA and organic farms, that they're good quality, so that we can hold them. And what we do, we tend to graze them after beef. We are looking, because our grass capacity has improved since rotational mob grazing. Excuse me, we have got the capacity to actually reintroduce a breeding flock of sheep. We had breeding sheep until about 2 years ago. And then obviously when it comes to beef, beef for our main enterprise, we have pedigree Aberdeen Angus, and they're all EID, they're all electronically identified. And one of the benefits of the Aberdeen Angus Breeding Society is that we've got all what they call the EBVs, the intramuscular spec. When we're selecting, the beef we want through our butchery, as Silas actually referred to it, we need high intramuscular fat, because if you've got high intramuscular fat, they age much better. And of course, they've got that quality of flavour. So we select our bulls, our terminal size, specifically for a high intramuscular fat spec in their genetics. And interestingly, that does go back to quite an old Aberdeen Angus genetic line, which, funnily enough, we've had to go through a couple of guys who do the bulls for us in northern Scotland, back to, the Canadians seem to have some of the old genetics. Anyway, that's the slightly by the by. So yeah, we do look at the genetics. And we weigh on a regular basis. We're achieving about 550 kilos live weight within between 16 and 20 months. So in order to get the return, we take our animals to the max 20 months. That's for our young animals. We also use veal from our own herd, and that's a really good way of taking out animals that actually we don't think are going to do terribly well. We've also, incidentally, through the years, found that high intramuscular fat in a native breed like Aberdeen Angus tends to translate to not just good conversion to live weight from grass, but also a much better tolerance to stress factors. So they withstand stress more easily. But having said that, we really do factor in careful, gentle handling to avoid stress. And that's very important. Our beef, or all our animals, go into lairage. Again, this is another important factor. We're very lucky with our abattoir, and obviously we have to use an abattoir with an organic line because we slaughter organically as well. So the abattoir we use take all our animals into lairage at night. So actually they have a 3 to 4 hour journey to our abattoir. Unfortunately, our closest abattoirs are equidistant, and they're about 4 hours away. And the animals go into lairage, which actually means that they rest overnight. Can you hear me? Because Annie seems to have frozen.
Yep, you're all good.
Okay, oh, thanks, Silas. So going to lairage at night is really important because it actually reduces any stress factors from traveling. I mean, no matter how you travel, all the bracing, an animal bracing in a lorry can actually produce a spike in cortisol or adrenaline, which are stress factors, which have to subside in the animal when they are alive, and they need 24 hours for that to subside before slaughter to ensure that actually you've got a good quality meat that's not affected by stress. Yes, we select our animals very much on the basis that Silas has already mentioned. So, I mean, I won't necessarily repeat what he said, other than the fact that we do make sure we get our 500 kilos so that we know that we're getting our return as farmers. And we use all the offal, and we use all the bones. So we've got a very good use of all of our meat through our butchery. Okay.
shall I just add a bit from our point of view?
Andy.
Yeah, so what I would say is that so AHDB Beef and Lamb do live to dead days, and so if you haven't ever done one of those, or if you haven't done one for a while, I would definitely do one. And on those days, you will actually get to grade live animals with a MLC meat grader, and then you will actually get to look at the carcasses, and that is so useful. It's also really useful because you get used to your own cows and what you might think is a really good cow or a really good carcass when you look at what the wider trade produces and where yours sits within that. That's really useful to know because some of your customers may be used to different sizes or much more commercial animals than you might have. So I would definitely recommend looking at HDB Beef and Lamb and signing up for a live to dead day. A few people have talked about the Europe grid. So I don't know whether you'll see this, but so my background does. Basically, there's a booklet from HDB Beef and Lamb that has the Europe grid in it. And so this has got fat class across the top and confirmation down the side. And there's a huge, huge financial difference as you move around that grid. And so we're looking for R4Ls, and we really focus on prime stock, and that is an R on the confirmation, and that is a 4 on the fat. And that's basically, if you get your animal an R4L, you kind of, that's the best spot in terms of return in terms of money. And so I'm always looking, so we sell some of our animals as store animals, and so I'm always looking at the price that the store animals get. And if you've got an animal that is poorer conformation or really big, actually we can make more money selling that live in a store ring than we can putting it through a butchery. And so even if you're never going to sell any of your animals live or to other people, and I want to get to the stage where all of ours go to the butchery, but we're not there yet, it's always worth trying to work out, how much is that actual animal costing you before you've got all your butchery costs on top. Because actually an animal that is a little smaller and a little poorer conformation, after butchery costs, you could actually be making a loss. And so, our target for the amount of retail sales of one carcass would be around sort of £2,700, £2,800. But I know that a poor animal could be under £2,000. So a lot of people say, oh, they're what they are. Well, they might be, but there's lots of levers you can do around breeding, around management, to actually make sure your carcasses and your beef makes you money. And if you don't watch that, especially at the moment with rising butchery costs, you can suddenly find that you've put a lot of effort in, you've got a great product, but you're not making any money. So getting your carcasses in that R4L for your prime beef is like really, really important.
Thanks so much, Andy. Sorry, I dropped out for a second there. My internet sometimes crashes, but hopefully it won't happen again. And Nick, I don't think we've heard from you. It'd be great to hear from your point of view, from a sort of butchery perspective, what you look for in a carcass.
Yeah, well, again, we're in a very unique sort of position here, which is good and bad. I don't think there's probably any other butcher. I don't know if there's any other butcher in the UK that works exclusively with dairy beef, as we do. From the two main partner farms for us are Johnny and Rachel Ryder at Horton House in Wiltshire, which is a pioneering pasture for life dairy farm, and David and Wilma Finley up at the Rainton farm. Denise also knows well and deals with. So we are dealing only with dairy beef, and Andy's absolutely right. Even if you do pay the price in the butchery, if the carcass is underweight or underfinished, but we're on a journey with these farmers. We're in it together. This is why it's so different, because we're in the partnership together. So we are supportive and simple. We're not penalising anybody for missing the grades. Just like they're hyper patient with us as a business of getting this off the ground for them. So dairy beef is, and the farm's on a continuous program of improvement. I mean, David Finley's got a breeding program and a finishing program that most of the dairy bulls are Angus cross, and Denise takes some, and we have some of the older heifers and bulls, and with Angus cross guarantees us a pretty solid carcass. In Wiltshire at Horton House, they're on a rapid sort of improvement breeding cycle program with more beef sire, more beef bulls. The dairy cows at Horton are just physically not big. They're not big cows. That's for a reason. Johnny knows exactly what he's doing in that regard. So we're not putting bulls over big cows. We're not getting huge calves, but it has to suit the system. It has to work for the dairy farm. So the beef is obviously a sort of not a byproduct of dairy, because increasingly it's becoming as important as the dairy to do the beef right. And so we're just on a sort of a cycle of it's going to take another couple of years probably to get where we need to be in terms of these great carcasses and consistency. But Andy's right, you do pay the price in the butchery, regardless of how lovely it looks, how much work you put into it, and how great it eats. What we've always been conscious to do is, the last thing I'll say is that we're in West London, so we've obviously got a bit of a head start there in terms of the sort of people here and the sort of money they've got. But when I was dealing with chefs in London, and we don't do as much of that now, it doesn't get me as sort of motivated doing the restaurant stuff. I really want to get this into people's homes and households and families and stuff. But we only work with customers, whether it's online wholesale platforms like Farm Drop or someone, or restaurant customers or other butchers. We only work with them really on the terms. They have to understand the terms of what we're dealing with the farm. But there's no point in saying to us, we want a river beef, so obviously look R4L. We've had inquiries from butchers, can you get us an ex-dairy river beef that looks absolutely, so they can put it on Instagram and put it in their cabinets. It just doesn't, it's not going to suit how our farmers work. And so we only really partner up with customers where there's some give and take there, and they don't penalise us if a river beef is less fat 1 week or whatever. So it doesn't work. So we're not trying to produce a uniform product, and the story and the provenance and the sort of everything that goes with it, we think is more important than just having every ribeye steak as fat as possible. So we're different. We are, but it's just struck up again. It's just the third time to say what Andy said. Yeah, in the butchery, we know the cost of butchery doesn't go down just because the cost is smaller. It's again, it's a real challenge. But we're just we're trying to break the mold a little bit and prove it can be done. And we're whole carcass, and obviously, as interview farmers are, we are a whole carcass. We only take the whole carcasses from the farm. We don't take in. We don't buy any boxed meat. But we have to make. Well, that's why we have to also have customers who can help us pallet that carcass. And that's we're doing okay with that so far. But it's obviously crucial. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's great. A bit about kind of, I guess, educating the customers as well around it too. I think we'll move on to talking a bit more about slaughter, and maybe starting off with taking stock to the abattoir. So how to kind of reduce the stress and what it's like taking your beasts to the abattoir. So maybe we kick off with I don't know, Silas, were you taking things yourself, or did you have a haulier take?
Yeah, so I took them myself just in the stock box. I always took 2 at a time. It does minimize stress. It also means less trips to the abattoir. So instead of doing once a week or once a fortnight, we would just obviously half that and take 2 animals. What I would do is I'd pull the next 2 months worth of animals, cattle out of the herd, and keep them in the 3 fields that are around the handling barn where I would load them eventually. So there wasn't this immediate removal of the herd, instant stress into the trailer, into lairage, into an abattoir. They were quite used to the surroundings by the time I actually put them on the trailer. And again, yes, me dropping them off myself to minimize stress. In terms of choosing the abattoir, and Denise has already mentioned how far it was for her. We were quite lucky where we are. We were on Henley on Thames, so we had good links to lots of parts of the country, but we only had 1 abattoir out of maybe 4 or 5 that we could have used that would deliver straight back at the butchery door. So we were certified organic, but the abattoir we used didn't have an organic line, so they were organic up until it went into the abattoir. So we just had to make that clear on the labeling, so that that was all kind of above board. But what we didn't want to be doing was investing time and money having to go and collect these carcasses however many times a month to bring them back. Especially the staffing side was just me really, with a butcher who didn't do other than cutting and packing at the time. His responsibilities didn't go beyond that. So if you're looking to do this and you have your own cutting unit, when you get carcasses back, I look at the abattoirs around you and what butchers there are around you, and find out which butchers are taking whole carcasses, because some butchers will just go to a wholesaler, and they'll drop them off straight from the wholesaler. Other butchers will be going straight from the abattoir. So you will find probably that there are butchers near you that are on a route from one of the abattoirs that you could use and dovetail onto that existing route, basically, because you probably will find that most abattoirs won't deviate from their current routes, unless you're taking a lot of carcasses. So the fact that we were taking kind of 4 a month in 2 different batches or so, it was a 5-minute detour for them to come straight to the farm and drop it off. So that was a massive factor. And the cold logistics is complicated, and to do it yourself, if you're going to do it, some people just transport it in the back of a Land Rover with a plastic sheet, which you can do under certain times and distances. But when you start doing it more to scale, you want to kind of start doing it in a properly controlled manner under refrigeration. So to make that investment is quite a lot. So really trying to figure out your cold logistics is really important.
Yeah, and probably not to underestimate the size of a carcass. So if you're thinking sort of, almost 200 kilos per side, that's a lot to carry.
Exactly, yeah.
Serious logistics. That's great, thanks. If we just hand it over to Denise, it'd be great to hear a bit about how you chose your abattoir, and also taking your stock down there and minimizing the stress. If we've still got Denise, she may have had to jump out actually.
Can you see me?
Oh, you're there. Yeah, you're there. Brilliant.
Hi. Yeah. So yes, we used to run our own animals to the abattoir, really, but as the market grew, we actually had to use a haulier. So we share a lorry with 2 other farms, and the lorry also goes to the local mart. So we basically piggyback on a lorry. It's a Freedom Foods licensed haulier, which is very important for our customers. They like to know that. And so basically he'll pick up on a Monday, they go into Lairge on a Monday night, they're slaughtered on the organic line first thing on Tuesday morning, then we get the abattoir return the carcasses to us chilled on a Wednesday. The issue incidentally about organic is our abattoir isn't organic, but we have an organic line on our license. So for those of you who want to explore organic slaughter, the Soil Association, basically we subcontract our license to the abattoir. So we're responsible for the abattoir fulfilling the regulations, and also we own the organic stamp. So it's up to us to make sure that the abattoir fulfill everything, and the buck stops with us if they don't. So, I mean, when we inspect the abattoir with the Soil Association, when they do the inspection, we share it with another organic farmer in Durham. So that's just something that you can look into, which might be a way around the issue of finding organic lines. So our animals they are pre-stunned. It is an abattoir that actually is also halal. They have a full-time imam, but everything is pre-stunned. Even the halal slaughter is pre-stunned. And so I think I mentioned about the importance of low stress before slaughter. So that's a really, really important consideration. We're putting in probably sometimes 2 fat steers a week. up to 10 mutton or 5 lamb, 5 mutton, and we use organic cull sows for our charcuterie, and they could be doing 6 of those, and then 3 or 4 fat pigs. So that goes every week now. It used to, when we first started, it was just be 2 pigs in a little trailer. So we've kind of learnt as we've gone along. Yeah, so we've seen our animals go through the slaughter line. I think that's very important. And we keep an eye on the abattoir. It's a very, very good farmer-led abattoir, and very quiet, very efficient. Not what you would think it would be. There's no smelling of blood or screaming animals.
Yeah, I think it's so important to go and visit the abattoir and really get to know them a bit and understand.
Oh, it's absolutely essential. Yeah, and I mean, if you can get your abattoir to put your animals into lairage the night before, that's really important. Really important. So
Have you found that's made a big difference to you? Did you used to do that?
Well, no, to be honest, it's by default that the abattoir offer that. The abattoir that we used to use didn't do that, but that's when we were mostly doing direct pork, and but now that we're doing direct all of our livestock, as it happens, they go into lairage, and it's brilliant. It is the most important, one of the most important factors in the whole process, from farm to the meat that we sell direct, is the fact that our animals they rest overnight before slaughter. Because I'm currently working on a rather controversial concept of a kind of an equitability in sentience. I think we are all equally sentient. I brought this up at parties and it usually ends up in a row, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. It'd be really good to have a seminar on what is sentience, and can sentience be equal? I believe it can. And I think that's why we have to deal with our animals with the utmost respect and consideration.
I don't think that's controversial too much. We actually had a couple of questions actually for you. Rachel said that her lambs go into lairage the night before, but they don't have any food, as the slaughterman says they need to be empty. Is that something that, I think I've heard that before as well, that they should.
Because what happens if they actually go into slaughter, when they eviscerate, if the gut is full of forage and fiber, the gut can split and contaminate the carcass, and they have to bin the carcass. So it's about cleanliness and hygiene. So they can have water but not forage overnight.
Yeah, and Bill asked if you've noticed a difference in the meat quality since you've been using lairage.
Well, certainly when it comes to our beef we've been doing since, we haven't, our beef hasn't actually yet we did have one beast that went into non-lairage, and there was a stress issue, but most of our beef we've sent to slaughter since we've been able to go to lairage. But the earlier slaughterhouse, we used to just send our pigs, would go kind of 3 o'clock in the morning and get there for 5, sort of thing. And we definitely had issues of, we were using Tamworths, and of course Tamworths are very stress resistant, but we would get more issue of the wet muscle syndrome that you get with stressed pigs. So no, Bill, I can't say we've noticed it, because we haven't had the comparison between non-lairage and lairage, apart from one beast, and that was an issue.
Oh, interesting. Thanks so much. I think we'll hand it over to Andy now. It'd be good to hear about how you load and take your beasts off, and also your considerations in choosing the abattoir.
Yeah, so we're now taking at least 2 at a time, sometimes 3 at a time. But at the start, and lots of people take individual animals, and so you can't suddenly just start at 2 animals, because that's a huge amount of beef to process or get someone to process. So you've got to kind of do the best you can, really. And you are putting a huge amount of sort of trust in the abattoir. So getting the animal used to the trailer. So what we generally do now is leave the trailer in the pen. We put some hay in the trailer, and so we're bringing our animals in for a couple of days beforehand, so pulling them out of the herd, letting them get used to the trailer, wandering in to get some hay. Interesting, Bill said that some of the researchers said that loading and unloading are the real stress points, and so if they're used to going to the trailer, it smells all right, loading is fine. You don't want to have an abattoir appointment booked and then you're there in the morning and you can't load an animal. And I know that our abattoir gets people ringing up at the last minute saying, oh, we're not bringing an animal because they couldn't load it. So getting an animal used to the trailer, we use our own trailer. And yeah, so I've used about 3 or 4 different abattoirs over the years. And I'm now using one that I think is really good. But it's difficult until you actually do it. You don't really know what they're like, really. And so it is a bit nerve-wracking. But yeah, the more questions you can ask, if they haven't got time to speak to you, well then, that's not a great sign. Every abattoir in the country, somebody has got a bad story about, and someone will always tell you, oh, he didn't send me back my animal. So you have to kind of take that with a pinch of salt. But obviously, if you hear a lot of, bad stories about one place, you might want to avoid it. For example, our closest abattoir, they kill a lot of horses. And so I felt uncomfortable using them because of this kind of whole horse meat issue. So I looked for somewhere else. But it's taking about 45 minutes to get to our abattoir, which is great. So yeah, so we're making sure they're used to the trailer. And then if you really can't get them in or there's a bit of an issue, I find like a branch of willow or something like that. A lot of ours graze a lot of willow on riverbanks. That can be quite tempting. And also just taking time, so making sure you've just got enough time. We do take ours in the evening before quite often because our abattoir is quite keen for that. I think it means they can start fairly early in the mornings, and they get loads of farmers all queuing up down the road, and it's easier for them. And yeah, it works well for us. So I'm quite a big fan of the evening before. And just ask if that's an option. They might not tell you that, but they might be well up for that. So yeah, that's what we do.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. Nick, I don't know if you've got experiences of maybe buying from abattoirs and working with abattoirs. It would be great if you have any kind of experience of that, to hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, I was at an abattoir, the abattoir Styles in Chippenham this morning. I was there this morning. So we do the collection, the pick up ourselves from the abattoir every time. We've got our own fridge van, and yeah, we load them here and we get back into our carcass fridge. So abattoir headaches and abattoirs is again front of mind. Yeah, we have a lot of takes up a lot of my time actually coordinating abattoirs, not just because there's problems with them, but just it's. I mean, the 2 main farms we deal with are Horton in Wiltshire. We are lucky that Styles is 3 miles. HF Styles is 3 miles from the farm. They have an organic license there, so Johnny can load, either species. And as he said, he could load cattle at 6:30 a.m. By 7:30 a.m. They're dead. They're slaughtered and done. That's how close it is. He's back at the farm and he's posed out to get on with his day. So we don't do lairage styles. It's 53 miles from the farm, so that has to be a good thing. And it's ethically that has to be a strong point. OTM cattle, which obviously dairy, all the dairy cows come to play a lot. Is a real stress for us. Finding abattoir that can do a tidy job of the BC spinal removal. Styles do a very rough job of it, so we've had to come close to London to Turners, who Silas will know, who do a very good job of it, but they're not organic. And now that we're certified as an organic butchery, we have to have an organic stamp. So we're now going to Snell's in Chard down in Somerset. We went there this week, and I'll be driving there Tuesday to pick those. First time to see how it goes. We're going to Broomhalls at the beginning of next month. Is Andy, are you at Broomhalls? You go to Broomhalls? Yeah, okay, fine. So we're going to Broomhalls to try them, to try and build a relationship with Broomhalls and Snell's. So it's a lot of driving, but we do it ourselves, and we go and get the carcasses. So we know we've got it's all ours, it's the right stuff. Getting the offal is getting the right offal with organic veal in particular. It's so crucial that we get the right offal, because of organic veal liver is worth a lot of money. Can we be 100% sure it's ours every time? I mean, Styles this morning, I said to the guy I'm loading me out the back door, is this definitely ours? He said, well, it's definitely organic, because we killed up 10 organic cattle yesterday morning, 4 of which were ours, or sorry, 8. And so he's confident, but he said, he put it on the vet, and he said, as long as the FSA put the right tag on them. But so that's the stress with the offal. The DC, the spine on the old cattle is a challenge, and then in Scotland, the challenge there is that organic, the nearest abattoir to Dumfries is at Lockerbie, Border Meats. We do an organic kill, but there's no transport offered to London, so we then got to drive up to get it ourselves, or coordinate something with one of those.
Are you going in the same day to pick up the offal? So do you pick up the offal on the same day that it's slaughtered, or is it?
No, the cattle will never be released on the same day. The earliest you can get them is 24 hours. But we would always get the cattle within 3. I mean, if it's in Scotland, it might take 3 or 4 days later. But the offal's still in perfectly good condition then. And if we're suspicious or dubious it's not our offal, or when you get the number of organs don't tally up to the animals you've killed, then we chuck it, and it's a shame, it's money lost. But we've got relationships. We've got relationships with abattoirs. They're all good people, but they're under. With Stars this morning, they were so short-staffed. The owner was in with the white coat on the line. You could hear them shouting and swearing, and they were saying, "Sorry, we're so behind." It's a thankless job, and they
have a lot to do.
Pressure.
Do you have any tips for getting your own offal back? Is it really just about having a good relationship with your abattoir?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, I spoke to Denise recently about this sort of, using their organic, using your own organic license to, on the line, and that's a really interesting one to look at. But I know a couple of PFL farmers who don't stand on the line and watch the cattle. But I think if you're doing 1 beast a month, then that's maybe viable. But if you're doing 4 or 5 a week, that's not great. It's not going to be viable to go and stand on the line. So, you just have to trust. I don't know. You have to trust and build that. I don't know. Nobody can guarantee it.
Yeah. Well, thanks. It is tricky. Right, I think we'll move on and talk a bit about hanging and dry aging. And it'd be great, Silas, if you could kick off with talking a bit about how long you used to hang different bits of the carcass for. Sure.
So I guess the main thing with aging and hanging, it's a mixture of the right temperature and the right humidity. So we were quite lucky. We had a custom-made butchery unit by a chap called John Fisher. Kind of almost looks like a container, but it's made to order, fully spec'd. Really easy to clean, wash down room with a kind of a walk-in chiller. We could get at a push probably 10 beef carcasses in, and fit lamb in there as well. We didn't feel the need to go out and spend money on all this kind of flash Himalayan rock salt bricks and all that kind of stuff. And you can do that on the cheap. You can put like a bucket of salt in there, and all that will do is draw some of the moisture out. So if you imagine every time you open the door, it's changing the humidity, the temperature. Whenever you put in more carcasses, again, that's going to affect the humidity and the temperature, because you're putting more stuff in there with moisture in it. We found that, we were quite lucky. We had all these temperature sensors in there anyway. So, on an app on our phone, we could see at any point what the temperature is, what the humidity is, and if it ever went above or below a certain parameter, we'd get alerts so we could go and do something about it. So we would know that if someone left the door open, or if we'd had a power cut or anything like that. And, what we found in general was, other than investing in the initial butchery unit with the room, we didn't really need to invest in a specialist dry aging unit. Or things like the Himalayan rock salt walls, which is what lots of butchers do. I guess it's just another way you can put a little bit more value on your product or market it in a different way, saying it's all been dry aged in these kind of Himalayan rock salt chambers. But we didn't need it. If you're starting to grow lots of mold, or if you're walking in, there's puddles on the floor or things like that, it's pretty good visual indicator that things aren't right. And I think the humidity, you want it to be about 80%, and the temperature, we want to keep it kind of between 1 and 5 degrees, pretty much. So that's your kind of what's your kind of your ballpark, but it does fluctuate. And it's just careful when you're cutting. If you're going to age some ribs or something for say 50, 60 days on these big fat coal cows, make sure your butchers cut it cleanly, because all these little nooks and crannies from a bow saw or a meat cleaver that he's not been very careful with, that's going to hold moisture, and that's going to produce mold, and that can get right into the meat if that crack or that kind of break in the meat is deep enough. And essentially you're losing money. When you're dry aging, you're losing moisture. So when you might put that carcass in, let's say 190 kilos aside, for every week it's in there, it's losing moisture, it's getting lighter. So don't feel you have to dry age the whole carcass for 28 days or 21 days, whatever it is. Think about the type of carcass you've put in there, how fat it is, the age of the animal. Also think about what you want from your different cuts, your different primals. Things like fillet, you're not gaining anything by aging it. Slow cooking cuts, you're not really gaining anything by aging it. They're all going to break down to be perfectly tender and soft just from the way that they're being cooked. Things like your top sides and kind of more, we didn't call them cheaper steaks, but we called them our American cut steaks, things like your flat iron, chuck eye, Denver, those kinds of things. We'd get away just with 2 weeks aging, 3 weeks. But yeah, we would dry age our prime cuts, your ribs, sirloin, rump, things like that, for at least 28 days. And actually, people would ask us how long things had been aged for, and they'd be happy to part with 45 quid for a 1.5 kilo Cote de Boeuf, thing that had been dry aged for 40 days. So yeah, it's just about treating not just each individual carcass differently, but different bits of the carcass. If you're going to go mince it and put it into burgers, just get it gone straight away. You don't need to age those parts of the animal.
Oh, that's really interesting. And just also quickly, for people that are then going to be probably hanging at an abattoir if they're starting out, kind of any tips for what to look for, what to ask the abattoir for, how long to go?
Yeah, so your abattoir or local butcher, they'll probably be much more open to letting you age those primal cuts for longer. It takes them much less space to keep your ribeye on the shelf for 3 or 4 weeks than asking them to hang the whole carcass for 3 or 4 weeks. So yeah, if they're able to be flexible in that way, or even they can process the whole animal but give you the primals back, and you can buy your own small dry aging chiller. Maybe you're going to get the whole thing back pre-packed in boxes, which is what lots of abattoir services offer. That can go straight in the freezer, but ask them to keep your sirloin, your ribeye, your rump, keep them as a primal with all the fat, all the bone on it, and just invest in a small little chiller, be the size of a fridge. And that's something that you could learn to cut yourself. It might not be worth it, but if you can find the right market, the right customer, you can start charging considerably much more money for that. And in terms of cuts and things as well, get really inventive. Don't just go for your standard supermarket shelf cutting list. I think we had, on beef alone, probably at least 60, 65 different cuts or options. If I take the rump, for example, we didn't just sell rump steak, which, we might have sold rump steak at £28 a kilo, but if I broke the rump down into 4 different muscles, which is what it is, we could have what we called the picanha or the rump cap, which is really popular. It was so really popular with lots of people in the area that were from Latin America or kind of Portugal, Spain. We turned that from £28 a kilo into £30 a kilo. Same with the tri-tip. Comes off the rump, it's the rump tail. It's a really great cut, like picanha is a sharing steak, but as much as there's less waste in doing it like that. But we've added an extra £2 a kilo, and the rump heart, which is the kind of central muscle that runs through the rump, looks like a fillet, super tender like fillet, but it tastes like rump. So you're kind of getting the flavour of rump, but with the tenderness of fillet. We were charging £45 a kilo for that. So all of a sudden that rump, if it was cut up as rump steak, has gone from £28 a kilo for the whole thing to breaking it down to 4 different pieces, and you're going to get more money for that. So yeah, and people want to try things that sound exotic, and we could have called it rump camp, we didn't, we called it picanha. And people want to know what it is, and you talk about it and how they cook it in Brazil, and how it's a great sharing piece, and it becomes something that they want to put on the table with lots of friends, and then all their friends come back to you and they want to buy the picanha as well. So you've kind of created a new market, but you've also created a big demand for it by just thinking out the box a little bit, which for us anyway was very important. It was kind of creating that buzz and getting everyone excited about what you're offering, because it's different from what they'll get from the high street butcher, or different from what they can find online or in the supermarket.
Yeah, a great way to add more value as well. That's what I guess this is all about. So trying to, get as much value out of the carcass as possible.
Exactly.
Great. If we'd hand it over to Denise now, talk a bit about your hanging, and yeah, maybe also a bit more about the different cuts that you have in your cutting list.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Annie. What we do actually, I just noticed a question from Chris Edford about hanging beef with pork and hogget. Just one pitfall there, because pork is such a wet meat, it actually increases the humidity of your hanging room. So just be aware that if you are hanging pork closely to beef, you won't get the kind of dry aging you expect. You will get quite a lot of molding, and you'll find that you're having to trim quite a lot. So it's a tricky one. I know if you've just got the one hanging room, it's fairly small, and you want to do pork, well, go ahead, do it. We did it. We hung all three species in a tiny hanging room for years, but we just took the hit that we were having to trim a lot more, and our dogs were very pleased with that. So nothing ever went to waste. Our dogs are fully keto. They're all paleo dogs. So the other aging, we don't see much benefit in aging more than the 28 days. I mean, we have aged for longer, and we've sold to chefs, and to be honest, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. Funny enough, we do our cull cows and we sell them as old prime to Scottish chefs. And we had one chef who asked us to age a rib for 13 weeks from one of our cull cows. And he then served it at an Abergavenny food festival about 5 years ago as a tartare. So he served it raw, and he said it was just incredible. So anyway, I mean, for the run of the mill, it's not worth hanging beef for more than that time. As Silas has mentioned, you're losing weight. We do actually, I have managed to get hold of some rock salt that we do use, because we found that we've just built our hanging room. There are a few construction issues that we're having to deal with. So it's actually not circulating as brilliantly as we'd want to. So we've actually put a humidifier in there, and I've got hold of some rock salt, and it has made a difference. It really has to the hanging quality of all of our carcasses, including our pork. So yeah, so humidifier. Chris, that's just a thought for if you're hanging all of your species in a small hanging room, maybe try a humidifier. That might help. As for lots of different cuts, I suppose we're kind of, because we're cutting and adding value to the three main species of lamb, pork and beef, but also veal and our mutton, we've got a lot to cut down and a lot to add value to. So we don't spend an awful lot of time adding value to one kind of meat. Like I love the idea of the picanha from the rump, but that actually, we can increase the price. There's a wee bit of waste. It takes a bit more of the butcher's time. It doesn't actually make that kind of fine, no, that's not the right expression, but that level, that degree of detail cutting actually doesn't necessarily bring us the return. So, also with Scotland and, people just like good joints of meat. And so we don't go to huge trouble unless a chef makes a specific request to do special cuts. And we have had chefs making some quite extraordinary requests that we've fulfilled. But for the run of the mill, we just use the standard cuts, because you've just got to think of the time it takes. Every time you cut something down, you've got waste. So it's time and it's waste.
And your customer as well, I suppose. So what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's right. And you see, also the other thing is if you're selling online, the thing about selling online is it's a fixed weight, fixed price. Otherwise, you create huge headaches for yourself and administering the online offer. So if you have loads and loads of different cuts and you're dealing with the shelf life limit of a carcass, unless you freeze and sell frozen, which I generally feel actually is a negative when selling. I think people much prefer to have fresh. So we do sell some frozen, especially our offal. Unless I can sell the offal within a week of it coming, then I freeze it and sell it frozen in the following few weeks. So yes, we tend not to be that exploratory in terms of the cuts of the individual things, because people tend to like straightforward cuts. And if you're cutting for the internet, you've got to be very straightforward, or else you're just creating a huge headache for yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I was thinking quick with what Denise said. So that's really key is understanding your market. Are you, we did courier orders, but we didn't have an online marketplace. And, we were Henley on Thames, so our market was incredibly wealthy, and London. We didn't sell anything like topside, stewing beef, mince. We just, that was the stuff we ended up putting to burgers. But those higher end things was different. Whereas if we were in Scotland or Wales or anywhere, I imagine our market would have been very different, and the demand for our products and cuts would have been very different. So it's all about gauging where you are in the world. Are you trying to sell locally? Are you trying to sell nationally online? And tailor what your product offering and your pricing strategy is going to be to that. It's quite unique for each farm, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Q, Andy, I think if we come to you and talk a bit about your hanging and your cutting with.
So just a few things. So lots of people don't have the luxury of their own hanging facilities, so then you have to use butchers, and so you can only do what they can provide for you. So it's worth asking about this. Now, some butchers are really, they say we have an aging chiller, and what they really mean is that stuff's put in there and they're not opening the door 10 times a day. So the reason why some butchers won't want to keep it too long is that if you get lots of temperature spikes going up and down where the doors kept open and closing, you just can't keep a carcass for long. Whereas if it's in a chiller and it's basically only opened once a day or every couple of days to look in, it will keep a lot better because the temperature is a lot more stable. So yeah, it's finding out whether it's going to be hung at your abattoir, how much they're charging you. Some abattoirs charge per day, whether it's actually going to go pretty fast to your butcher or cutting room, and whether they can hang it. So it's asking all these questions. I would agree as well that for the prime beef that we do, so we're hanging it for a month, and we hang the whole thing for a month, because the way we work is that we're basically only open and working there a couple of days a month. So it's most cost effective for our time to process a whole carcass. So the mince, everything has been aged for a month. What that means is our mince is actually sort of a lower dry matter than normal mince, so people get really excited about it, and I haven't got enough of it. And so that's a good point from aging a whole carcass. But yeah, if you can find butchers that will age different bits, that's all fine. But again, then think about selling it. If you're selling in boxes, I actually like to do all the packing at once and then all the selling at once in like a monthly cycle. And then I do sell a little bit out through the freezer during the next month. But you've got to your time is really valuable to try and make it work. In terms of, so we do have our own fridge now, which is really great. And what I was told about mold and moisture is the cheapest way to sort that out is fans. So there's a couple of butchers I know who are really well respected, and they don't use Himalayan salt box. They don't use dehumidifier. They've got 2 fans from Argos. And that means that any moisture in the air is kept in circulation in the air, and it's not forming condensation on the meat. And since we started doing that, it's made a huge difference, and it's cost like 60 quid for a big floor fan. In fact, they weren't from Argos; they were from Screwfix, I think, and then a pedestal one that revolves. And yeah, that and the meat should smell really good. So sort of a strong beefy smell, but a good smell. And so that we found that little thing has made all the difference. So yeah, I would try that before investing huge amounts of money. In terms of cuts, yeah, there is this slight tension between massive diversity and interest and creativity, and actually trying to get people who are doing the butchery to do it in a good time and do it consistently. And so when we used a butcher off-site that was connected to a slaughterhouse, this was always a little bit of a battle, getting them to actually cut the cut list. And occasionally when I put exotic things on there, we would have some quite long, complicated phone calls. Also, you run into the things that that different butchers have different names for the same cuts. So there's a brilliant website, I think it's a Scottish one, that lists all the different beef cuts and all the different names. And this is even before you go into American names for cuts. So make sure you know what you're asking for and that your butcher understands what that is. So we had this whole confusion about shins of beef and legs of beef. And then, yeah, so people in the west of the country call one thing one way, and then towards London call it another way. So to make sure that what you think you're getting your butcher to cut is what they're actually going to cut. So yeah, we have diversified more as we've got our own in-house capacity, and we're always up for customers telling us that they want something particular, and that's great because we can do it. When you're using a third party to do your cutting, if you keep it simple, that's safe, and you might want to keep it fairly safe to start with until you kind of build that relationship. But also do talk to them. They might have some really good product knowledge. So we've now got a butcher working for us who used to manage butchers' shops, and he's really good on the economic knowledge. So he can actually tell you, well, if you did this, you're going to make more money. And so he went through our ribs of beef with us. So we worked out, so say you're selling a rib of beef on the bone at £20 a kilo. If you then take that out, take the ribeye steaks out, and you weigh the wastage, you weigh what would be trim, those ribeye steaks have got to be sold for double the price. They've got to be sold for £40 a kilogram to make the same money as you would standing rib. So yeah, each time you cut a piece of beef down, there will be waste. There will be trim that's dropping from, whatever it was, £20 a kilo down to £10 a kilo, and there'll be stuff that might, go in the bin, and there'll be time. So it's just trying to start off safe and then gently explore other things, I would say.
Great, thanks. That was really helpful. And Nick, it would be great to hear from you as well about how long you hang, and I guess the hanging facilities that you have, and yeah, how you do your cutting.
I know you're recording this video, but the advice just dished out by Silas, Denise, and Chris is absolutely priceless. That's people should take notes, or you can do a write up on that, because you can basically learn. You come a hell of a long way just by digesting and sort of. So now, in terms of hanging space, we've got quite a big unit here, but we haven't actually got a great indoor cold room capacity. We're operating with a John Fisher, like Silas mentioned, modular fridge. It stands on the concrete slab outside our building. Just external fridge, so it's every time you open the door, you've got whatever the weather that day is, it can affect the humidity. And we've played around. We've got a bit of himalayan salt in there, but I am going to get a dehumidifier. Spend a few £100 maybe and get it, and hope that will help things. But as Andy said, we have got a couple of large floor fans in there from Amazon, £40 each, and they do. And you don't point them straight at the meat, but we point them up at the ceiling, and they just sort of help. It's simple air circulation, as Andy said. It does make a difference. We run the fridge at sort of 1 degree, and that's sort of how we roll currently. And I'd love to have quotes for sort of all singing, dancing carcass fridges. There's also this technology now. A company called Dry Aging UK, which are producing quite interesting hardware. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but you basically can do away with evaporator condensers and compressors and that. And you basically have this one unit that sits in your cold room, they only can, these units can only drive a cold room that, you know, not huge. You couldn't drive a huge cold room. Unless you had a 3 metre by 3 metre cold room, that's about the maximum capacity. Dry age UK, and you get this unit for about 12 grand. It sits in the, you can put in any kind of, you know, cam lock panel basic cold room, and it's a chiller, a dehumidifier, and it has UV lights to kill any bacteria. So it basically means you can leave any piece of meat in there for almost any period of time that will stay perfect. However, I'm a big believer that pasture for life meat being the, and sort of having this, you know, 100% grass fed, it's such a sort of beautiful natural product anyway that I don't particularly want to be extensively dry aging any of the meat really. I mean, science say that, you know, tenderization of meat is only up to about 21 days anyway. You're not getting huge benefit after that. So we do quite a lot of cutting and sort of taste test here. We don't wipe out too much profit, but we do, you know, cut a bit off some of the ribs and sirloins and eat a bit to see if it's ready in the babbitt and all that stuff. And after 3 weeks, and certainly within 4 weeks, it's absolutely great to eat. And our customer base, although we're in West London, Twickenham is a, you know, good solid working area, working families here. Richmond and Teddington are a sort of affluent, but they're not. It's not the same. We're not in Chelsea or Knightsbridge or Fulham here, so we are. And our customer base isn't that adventurous to finding. So we do flat iron. We do a bit at Denver as a speciality steak at the shoulder, or chuck eye, which is a great cut which a few people have you know, sort of, livened up to. But we keep our product range reasonably conventional because our customers are not. We don't yet seem to be ready for these, you know, wacky stuff. And if you don't, if it doesn't sell, you're left with this cut. You end up having to try and recycle something else. Plus, our customers, you know, we spend a huge amount of time speaking to our customers and getting their feedback and even surveying them and stuff. And dry aged meat is not. You always get blokes who come in and say, "Oh, you do a brisket dry for 60 days." But that's a really, really niche crowd. It's really small, and it's not. I wouldn't gear your butchery up to sort of cater to just those people too much, because a good, really good, tender, clean grass-fed steak, you know, hung 3 to 4 weeks, will keep 98% of the people happy. So we're not looking to expensive dry age things, and we want a customer base that's going to buy a range of products every week, not just the bloke who's going to come in once every 3 months and say, "Can you have a 60-day aged ribeye?" and then not buy from them again. We want to. We're not trying to really cater to that market. The last thing I'd say on butchers is we've had, you know, again, a lot of experience with various butchers from different backgrounds, different ages, different mindsets, and any butcher that works here, you know, and you say you can't sort of emphasise it enough. They have to evolve their mindset that they're working with, because they're working with 100% pasture fed and it's dairy. It's not going to be R4L heavy duty carcasses. There's no point in showing me pictures on their phone of the place they work where they buy grain fed beef with, you know, 2 inches of fat on the rib, and this is what I should be buying, and telling me this is what I should be buying. It's not, you know, it's not how it works, is it? It's the grass fed. And they have to. And, you know, a couple of butchers have fallen by the wayside here because they just can't evolve their thinking. And what I would say to people who are going to go and have their meat cut up by an abattoir or a butcher to then direct sell. I mean, Cathy Boyd's a great example. Their patterns from Broomall's are I believe they're very, very conventional, sort of unadventurous cutting spec, but it's perfectly suited just to shipping the whole carcass and getting it sold, and people are happy with it. And what I was going to say is, don't let, if you like, old school butchers tell you that you have to do things a certain way and that you can't do, you know, butchers told me in the early days you can't hang lamb for more than 3 days, or you have to have a cut pork, or a lamb shoulder is only good for stewing. It's not, you know, a pasture-fed lamb shoulder, you slice it to steaks, grill them, pink. It's a beautiful soft cut of meat. So I would just say old butchers are full of a lot of what's it sometimes. Don't always listen to what they say, because if you're dealing with pasture-fed and the rest of it, it's a different product to sort of conventional meat, and works things, you know, of course you're not all going to be able to cut it up yourself and do your own butchery stall, but just don't always listen to what you're told by old butchers, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, thinking outside the box, definitely, because there are definitely, you know, these quite sort of traditional views on things, and
yeah, and it can drag you down, and force you to do things that devalue the meat or make you doubt, you know, what you're dealing with. And people say, why go and get, you know, you can get R4L beef from this wholesaler or something. And that's missing the whole point, isn't it? So
yeah,
so
that's really helpful. Thank you. I think it'd be great to talk a bit about packaging and labeling. So what kind of packaging you think is good and that you use, and also what you put on your labels. If we head back to Silas.
So can I just jump in one sec? I actually have another meeting now in 5 minutes. I'm really sorry. I do apologise. I need to go. But
not at all. Thank you so much for your input, Nick. It's really helpful.
The time's flown by. It's been brilliant and high quality group. Right. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah. Bye. See you later.
Bye.
See you in Oxford. See you in Oxford. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
I will do.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, so packaging. So if you've got to think about shelf life. So if you're going to vac pack something, then you have to put you cannot put more than a 10-day shelf life on that product from the day of packing, unless you do some lab tests which show that your product meets certain parameters if kept in that package for more than 10 days. That's true for any meat product apart from offal or anything that's been minced. So offal, I think we had it down as 4 or 5 days. You think the offal's got much more bacteria in it just because of the nature of what it is. And the mince, burgers, sausages, anything like that, what you've done is you've taken the outside of the meat and you've churned it all up with the inside. So the bacteria that might have been there on the outside of the carcass is now in all of that meat. So the shelf life naturally drops. So that comes down to how are you going to pack things. You know, I've got stuff in the freezer from another PFLA member, and they're using this really cool recyclable bags. Has all come frozen. I've also bought stuff that's fresh from a butcher using the same thing. So this is kind of a brown paper bag, and it's sealed at the top of it like an envelope, but it hasn't drawn all the air out. So the shelf life of that, I imagine, would be less, because when you're backpacking, you're removing the air and you're limiting the amount of moisture in there, which is what will drop the shelf life. What you also can't see with these recyclable bags, which I think are great, is you can actually see the product. So when we were at English Farm, we didn't have a butchery shop on the farm. We didn't turn up and walk in and there was a counter. Things were cut to order and you would come and collect on an arranged time. We also did lots of things like, we did a couple of local farmers markets. What we would also do, which we found is what really generated income, was get people to your farm en masse for an event where it's a farm walk with a barbecue and they all want to go and buy stuff on the way out. So we made sure that our packaging, everything was visible. So whether at the farmers market, we could have things out on display and they could see what they were buying. They wanted to look at it, touch it, kind of pre-COVID, obviously, we weren't touching through COVID, but people like to see what they're buying. So we did use plastic, which we didn't really want to do, but what it did is it allowed us to have things with a longer shelf life and have our product on display. With the labeling, we kept it very simple. We had a kind of a circle English Farm label, which took up, it's the size of a large coaster. So that took up most of the front of the packaging. So you could clearly see our branding, our name, and it had Longhorns, I can't remember now, but all the buzzwords of what we were: organic, 100% pasture fed, Longhorns, born, raised, butchered at English Farm, something like that. And in the middle of that circular English Farm label would go the till ticket. So the weight, the name of the product, the pounds per kilo, the price of the item, the herd number of the individual animal for the traceability, the number of the abattoir that it was slaughtered on. So you need to think about your product needs to be traceable. So if there's a problem with it, you can track that back to what animal and what might have happened. You also need to display certain things on the labeling by law. So yeah, we kept it quite simple, but we did get lots of comments and good feedback on how good the branding was. It was very easily recognizable, and it kind of matched the premium product. The image of the branding matched the premium product that we were trying to sell. But we also made sure that when you turned it over, you could see the whole product.
That's great, thanks. Denise, it would be great to hear a bit from you about your packaging and labeling and what you choose.
Oh, thanks, Annie. So I suppose when we started selling direct, we were having to convince quite a young market, well, a very early market to selling direct. I mean, I can remember coming back from farmers markets with, you know, pork bellies and thinking, how on earth are we going to move these? So it was quite important way back then. And that's, you know, that was the year before, the first farmers market we attended was the year before Foot and Mouth. So it's 1999. So our label really had to sell our product for us. So it's quite colourful. It's quite big. It's quite comprehensive. It doesn't cover the meat because actually seeing the meat is really important. So that's the label. It's a high quality. It's colour. It's not recyclable, unfortunately. Big problem for us. The second issue, farmers markets, the meat has to be seen. So, and everything's vac packed. So we currently, we have been using a vac pack, a clear vac pack, which unfortunately has nylon in it. And that stops the vac pack sticking. So our supplier has got recyclable non-nylon backpacks, but they are incredibly difficult to get hold of. So it is a cause of quite a lot of concern for me that our meat is not, our packaging isn't recyclable. So one of the customers we sell to, a wholesale customer who takes quite a lot of stuff and they sell on, when I've discussed the issue with them, they've said they balance the use of a non-recyclable, robust backpack and vacuum seal with the waste that would come of a poor vacuum seal or poorly kept meat from a poor vacuum seal. So, and I mean, they're B Corp companies, so they're high up there in terms of their sustainability credentials. So yeah, so packaging is an area that I am still, well, I've gone back to the drawing board on. I'm not happy with what we're using, but I have to say it looks very good on the display unit. I have trialed a cellophane, and I use the cellophane with the vac packet. It vacuumed perfectly well. I sent it to the laboratory we use for all the microbiological testing. It got to actually the 11th day after packing perfectly well, without any unacceptable spikes in, you know, enterobacteria, whatever. So it ticked all the boxes. But unfortunately, the cellophane, after about 2 or 3 days in a display unit, went yellow and made the meat look yellow. And the customer who was trying it for us in his shop, who's very, very green customer, just said, look, folks, I'm just not selling that meat because customers think it's off. So we had to go back to our nylon-based plastic. So it is definitely an area that really, really needs a lot of work on. But I was quite interested, Silas, in that the sealable brown paper bags, because we could certainly do our online in brown paper because they don't actually have to see it, but people we sell to who have retail shops would have to be in clear, and farmers markets would have to be clear, but at least it would be going in the right direction if we could sell some of our products in the sealable brown paper bags.
I've actually got an example of each about 2 foot away, so I could just scoot off and just hold them up to camera to give people an idea about what each one looked like and what that looked like.
Yeah.
Maybe while Andy gets started.
Yeah, I've also had issues with so vac packs. So the good things about vac packs is that for all the reasons we've heard, but also you're never quite sure what your customer's going to do with your meat, okay, between when they pick it up from you and when they eat it. And they do all sorts of things that you've never even thought they might do with it, like leave it on their car seat while they go shopping. Yeah, store it in all sorts of ways that you wouldn't advise. But vac packs are really robust and they give you the best chance of that customer having a good eating experience. So I've looked at compostable ones made from plant-based materials, but none of them could give me a full life cycle analysis. And the ones that look best turned out to be coming from Australia. and were basically, I think, a product of a monocrop irrigated system in Australia, which is like crazy. So then I looked at getting them recycled, and one of my customers is very green. There's a film collection stuff at Tesco's, and they say they can recycle them. But then talking to my vac pack guy who services my vac packer, says that vacuum packs are complicated. They're a laminate of various different types of plastic, so they're really difficult to recycle. And he wasn't actually sure that the film recycling facility could recycle them, and I'm probably messing up their film recycling. So it is tricky, and I'm going to stick with them at the moment because the shelf life and the fact that they work, they don't leak. And then paper. So I know somebody does everything in paper and string, but you've got to find paper that hasn't got a plastic laminate into the paper. And you need an extra person with clean hands. So you double up your labor on packaging if you're using paper and string, and they can't see it. So it is tricky. The safe option is vac packs, but yeah, I'm keeping looking for other things. Sorry.
Just an example. So this is the non-vac pack from a friend, which I think would be great. Then he said for online options, it is recyclable, which is great. And then this was our kind of standard vac pack. So we had the branding with the label, and obviously you can see the meat, which was great for your farmers market and having people that hadn't pre-ordered stuff. So yeah, two good options.
Silas, what's the source of the brown paper? And as Andy said, does it have plastic laminated into it? I mean, is it recyclable, presumably? Is it?
So it's called Sealed Fresh. It's sealed in fresh and leak proof, premium food and premium backpack, and it's got all the recyclable signs on it.
Oh, very cool.
So yeah, I think it's a really good idea. It's not just I wouldn't say who they are, but they are PFLA and they make really good produce. But I've seen high street butchers using this too, because they can obviously cut and just seal it. So there's not so much of a worry about the shelf life, because when we pack something in English, we wanted it to last a good 10 days, so it gives a 10-day window to sell it. But I imagine in those bags that have got the air in it, we would have that same shelf life.
So where do they come? Where do they come from? What's the source of them, Silas?
I imagine the brand's called Sealed Fresh. So
okay, sorry. Yeah, got that. Okay, yeah, that's really helpful.
Cool.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I just dropped out again, but I'm back. I don't think we've heard from Andy yet. It would be great to hear a bit about you. And I know also, Andy, you had lots of tips on making your own labels. So what label printer to buy? Because I know if you are getting meat back from a butcher, you may get some things on the labels, but then you also may want to supplement your labels as well.
Yeah, just on the label side. So we started off, so our butcher put a very, very basic label on, but it didn't meet the EHO or the trading standards labeling regulations. And so I used this little printer, thermal printer, cost 70 quid. So it's a Brother, and I think it is QL 700. So it's a tiny little thing, size of a big jacket potato, and a little bit of software that comes with it on your laptop. And so we did loads of labels with that. We had a different label for each cut and printed them out as we needed them. And it was cost effective, and we used it for about 3 years before this year we upgraded to a weigher labeler. So it did mean we had to weigh individual cuts and write the weight on with a pen, and we didn't put a price on them because we were selling it all boxed. But now we sell at our pop-up farmers market, we need a price on every item, and we don't want to give too much away. So yeah, the weigher labeler for us was good, but they're about £2,000, so you need to be doing quite a lot of business to actually justify one. So a little 70 quid label printer was great, really good, and 6p a label or something, I think. So it was ace.
That's great. And how do you package all of your cuts?
Backpacks. Yeah, we had a little chat about that just now. So.
Great, cool. And actually, while we're with you, maybe it'd be good also to talk a bit. I know there are a few questions about what to put in boxes, so sort of balancing your carcass, because I guess when people are starting out as well, they may want to try and shift everything in boxes, and what your feelings are sort of on boxes versus selling individual cuts, because it sounds like you started out with boxes, but you've kind of then grown and you're now selling individual cuts as well.
So my aim is to sell, so we have a monthly cycle and sell 75% of it as a pre-order. So that's people emailing me, and so I have a MailChimp list, send out an email, and hopefully they now go to the online shop and pre-order and buy it. And so, yeah, we're doing a just for two box, which the idea is that you've got meals for two people in each of the things in there. So there's 2 steaks, a small joint, 2 packets of mince, 2 packets of stew and steak, and then 1 bavette that you share between 2. And that's our most popular. It's £55. There's no weight given for the whole box, so it gives me a bit of wriggle room. We then do a family box with sort of 2 joints in it, no steaks, 5 kilos. They're fairly popular. And then we do a cook's box, which I've listed in the chat, which which is really useful for some of the slower cuts. And then with the steaks, so sirloins, rumps are separate, and that sort of kind of works. But now we have a monthly farmers market. We get a lot of walk-in sales, and the basket spend from the farmers market is less than people buying boxes, obviously, and that's quite a good outlet for really big steaks, really small steaks, all sorts of things. And offal's really popular. So even if you don't think you've got a market for it, make the effort, go and get your offal. If you sell it all from a beef animal, it's worth £100 an animal, and yeah, that's quite good. And with the offal, I find the smaller the portions, the more I sell. So selling 500 grams of liver, even if it's a really good price, it's a bit too much. Put it into 250 gram packs, flies out. Just started doing steak and kidney packs because we're now getting our animals back that we can use the offal off one into the carcass meat the next. And pre-made steak and kidney in a little vac pack flew off the shelves. Yeah, seems to be very popular. So that's kind of works for me. But again, it's trying to, you want your basket spend, you want that transaction to be as much as possible in one go, because that saves you labor and work, but you've got to let it be accessible. So I've diversified on the website. I now have a few other things like unrolled briskets. If I've got too many joints around, I'll list the joints on there. But yeah.
And you're mainly trying to sell pre-sell everything fresh. Do you sell much frozen?
So we do sell some frozen, and it's good to have a bit of frozen in stock. But I can't. The thought of having, I've seen some people with like 4 chest freezers in a shed full of beef. That's, to me, that's like really high risk. It's all your profit just sat there. We're ready for a power cut. So no, we still, even though we've put our numbers up, we still try and so we're butchering on a Thursday and a Friday. Customers come on a Saturday, and in an ideal world, there's only 25% of it left, and so we're trying to stick to that because it's time efficient. But I know that that's just one way of doing it. There's obviously other ways of doing it.
And you're not sending that much out by courier?
No. I mean, I did 1 box off the last animal because for me, the costs of doing that, I'd rather recommend them to their local pasture-fed farmer near where they live. The cost and logistics, and also because I'm such a small player, I don't get prioritized by the couriers because I'm not sending enough out. And over lockdown, I was bottom of their list. So I was looking at really trying to get into that side of it, but now I've got enough people within 15 miles really working on that face-to-face stuff. So I'll let other people do the kind of mailing meat around, which is potentially a good business, but not for me at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. Silas, it would be great also to hear a bit from you about balancing the carcass and boxes, because I know that actually at English Farm, I think you sold more individual cuts rather than boxes.
Well, it was definitely an evolution, because as I said, when 3-4 years ago when it all started, it was very similar to what Andy said, and it was butchers coming in just like a couple of days a month and just trying to process the whole carcass and then sell the whole carcass. And a lot of that was in set boxes, some of it by courier, and English Farm still does offer set boxes. We just found with our client base, they just weren't particularly popular. Even though they were kind of, we'd do like the Longhorn box, which is the premium £110, roasting joints, minced, diced beef, premium steaks like sirloin, burgers, some more, American contemporary cuts like your chuck eye, Denver flat iron, which are basically what we offered as cheaper steak options. And then we'd do like a smaller medium box that was similar, but we wouldn't have the premium steak, so you could get it cheaper. Or we do like a more specialist thing, like a slow cook box. So it'd have your brisket, your short ribs, diced beef, ossobuco or shin, things like that, or just a simple cook's box, which was minced, diced beef burgers, just everyday family things. And it was different price ranges for different people. And yeah, we did a bit of courier delivery. We made the customer pay for the courier, so we didn't really front much the cost on that other than the packaging. And with the packaging, we used a company called 3R Sustainable Products. So it was all cardboard, sheep's wool insulation, gel freezer packs. So the whole thing was pretty much reusable and recyclable. Again, I didn't want to make the business model based around mail orders and couriers. It was a lot of time, especially, staff-wise, a lot of time it was just me. You'd have to put boxes together, you'd have to pack them, you'd have to get them all ready for the courier, print off the label, make sure that you're around or someone's around to give it to the courier. And it was hard work. And how the whole thing at English really evolved for me anyway was, I really thought, how can I make other people or other businesses do more of the legwork to sell our product? And, I just really got in tune with the local community, people would ask to come to the farm. I would invite people to the farm, think about, who's in the area, who's a food writer or a blogger, or really interested restaurant owners and chefs, or, get on radio, even ended up getting on the TV and everything else. And once you start creating a kind of a real buzz around what you're doing because of what other people are talking about, we found that everyone just wanted to come to the farm. And that took all the kind of stress, a lot of the stress out of trying to, sell cuts, because when there were a couple hundred people on farm, there was a frenzy just to buy anything there was. And, we could have sold 3 or 4 times more stuff than we'd actually packed sometimes. And they are actually the times that we made a lot of the money. Most of the money in a short period of time was getting people out, giving a hot food offering, get them invested in what you're doing on the farm level. And yeah, we kind of moved away from the box thing, and people would just usually ask what they wanted because they didn't want half of what was in the box. And a part of that was thinking about, okay, what are the things don't we sell very much of? And again, part of the local community, we struggled to sell lots of topside. So we found our local pub who only wanted English farm beef on the Sunday roast menu. So they took, 10, 15, 20 kilos of topside each week, which solved a massive problem for us. Not only that, they had English farm on the menu, they had an English farm promotional card on each table. So whenever anyone went there for Sunday, they got the card and they came back to us in the week to buy steaks and mince. Same as I mentioned previously with the burgers, with the burger barn. So anything we struggled to sell, straight into burgers. And, in that burger barn, all of our posters, branding, name everywhere. And they were turning over hundreds and hundreds of people each weekend. So yeah, the headache we had at the start about trying to balance the carcass slowly solved itself by working with other people, other businesses that really loved what you were doing, but also getting them to get the general community and the general retail customer excited about English farm and excited about English farm's produce, without us really having to spend a penny on marketing, advertising, or wasting time. Not wasting time, but spending time I didn't really have doing things like courier deliveries.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. Well, I think we've actually reached 6 o'clock, and I feel like we've covered so much, and there's always still more that we could cover. But I just want to say a really big thank you to Silas and Andy and Nick and Denise, who've had to dash off, unfortunately. Really, that was so interesting and just like amazing that you could share so much with us. So thank you very much. I think I've definitely learned a lot from today's session. Also, Bella wanted me to mention that the Landworkers Alliance has organised a visit to, I think it's Warson Beef. They are down in Devon. It's on the 30th of November. And if anyone is keen to join, I think they'll be putting out information about that. So to learn a bit more about their direct sales, they were actually featured in the little video that I showed at the beginning. And yeah, I mean, if anyone would like to also check out the Pasture-Fed Livestock Association toolkit, there's a link to that in the Future Farm Resilience resources, which I think will be sent out in a follow-up email, if that's correct, Bella. And also just big thanks to everyone for joining. It's really great to have you all here, and I hope everyone learnt a lot. And yeah, thanks again to our panelists. And yeah, Andy's just also said in the chat, if anyone has any questions, he's shared his email there. So very kind of you. Thanks, Andy. And I know Denise said she would be happy to answer anyone's questions as well, so we can put you in touch.
I've just popped my email on the chat as well, which is an incredibly long email, but if anyone has as well, any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Saz. And yeah, for anyone that is up round Oxford or not far away, I know there's going to be an event at FAI next Friday. That's right, isn't it?
Thursday, next Thursday.
Sorry.
You will need to get a ticket, but the ticket is just to cover the cost of the catering and the food and the lunch. It's obviously not direct selling, but we're very much kind of, we're a global research and consultancy business, looking at kind of global sustainability and food supply chains, looking at big global brands, but we have our kind of hub HQ farm here in Oxford, which is what I manage. So it's all talking about regenerative agriculture, and kind of how we're making everything work on farm, outwintering, bale grazing, amp grazing, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, great. We're looking forward to that. Yeah, and Bella's put the link for the resources for the direct sales toolkit in the chat as well. So I think that's it. Just big thanks to everyone. And yeah, hopefully we'll be back online again next week for our last direct sales webinar, which is all about dairy. So it's a similar thing, but talking more about sort of processing and selling dairy straight from the farm to your end consumer. So maybe I'll see some of you there. All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.